Hello, I'm Cheryl Kaw, the Black Resource Center Librarian for LA County Library. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing you to tonight's speakers. Leading our conversation is our County Librarian, Skye Patrick. Skye Patrick was appointed to her role in 2016. She is responsible for the library's 86 libraries, 15 vehicle mobile fleet, and resources that are used by more than 3.4 million customers across LA County. From the beginning of her tenure, Patrick prioritized community engagement through visioning sessions, inviting the public to share their ideas for local libraries. Her mission has been to break down barriers and expand access by developing programs that meet the needs of LA County's diverse communities. Under Skye's leadership, LA County Library received the 2023 National Medal for Museum and Library Service, the nation's highest honor given to museums. She is also a recipient of the 2025 James Irvine Leadership Award, which recognizes leaders whose innovative solutions to critical state challenges improve people's lives, create opportunity, and contribute to a better California. Patrick remains dedicated to reinforcing the library's role as a hub for information, literacy, civic engagement, learning, and belonging. Tonight, Skye will be interviewing Shelia, Melissa, and Sylvia Burlock, authors of My Divine Natural Hair, Inspiration and Tips to Love and Care for Your Crown, and Natural Hair Advocates. Shelia Burlock and her daughters, Sylvia Burlock and Melissa Burlock, are a writing trio from Indianapolis, devoted to bolstering self-esteem and hair health in Black women and girls through celebrating the history and dignity of Afro-textured hair. Between them, they have curated a natural hair course tutorial, developed an organic product line, and written on the topic of natural hair in outlets like salon.com and NaturallyCurly. My Divine Natural Hair, Inspiration and Tips to Love and Care for Your Crown is their debut book. Shelia, Melissa, and Sylvia, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Skye will hand the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, and welcome, ladies. Good to have you here. Thank you, everyone who showed up for this program. As is customary, I will read the land acknowledgement for Los Angeles County. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tuktaviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash people. We honor and pay respects to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, and as they continue their stewardship of these land and waters. We acknowledge settler colonialism resulting in land seizures, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, reconciliation, and elevating the stories and culture and communities of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and their local tribal governments, including, and in no particular order, the Fernandino Tuktaviam Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Quiche Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. Thank you. Okay, ladies, it's really nice to have you here. Who am I speaking with? Is it Shelia with the headband?
Yeah, right in the middle.
Okay, Shelia is mom. Okay, let's get this right. Okay, and to your, maybe it's your left, but the other headband.
Sylvia.
Sylvia, okay. And then, of course, we have Melissa.
Yes.
Okay. I'm so happy that the three of you could make it. I hope that we have a great and fruitful conversation.
Yes.
You know, obviously, this is Women's History Month, followed by, closely followed before was Black History Month. So this is a very appropriate and timely conversation about hair in all of its entities for Black women. So let's get started.
Okay.
Okay.
I think one of the questions that I love and that would, I think, really set this conversation off is talk about what is meant by good hair. So let's contextualize this. Within the Black community, there has been this lore of good hair versus not good hair or bad hair. Let's talk about the differences between those two from your vantage point. Let's start with Shelia.
Okay. I really like that we're starting with this question, Skye. What is good hair? Because the premise for our book is really the intersection of faith and hair. And our faith defines us. So therefore, our faith defines the definition of our hair. And God says that our hair is fearfully and wondrously made. He designed our hair, and our hair is his intentional choice. And because he rejoices over us and says everything that he has created is good, we have good hair.
I love it.
I mean, I really like this question too, because it makes me think about what is even this concept of good hair, and where does this conventional definition of good hair come from? So when you think about it, historically speaking, good hair is really one half of this dichotomy that comes out of slavery, right? It was plantation owners who fabricated this idea that good hair is European hair that has a straight texture. And then, as you said, by necessity, if you have good hair, you have to have bad hair. So bad hair was Afro-textured. It was hair that plantation owners derogatively referred to as wool. But as Mom said, we don't believe that our identity begins at slavery. We believe that our identity begins at creation, right? So spiritually speaking, everything that God made is very good. He said it was very good. He pronounced that it was very good. And that includes the way he created Black women's hair to naturally grow from our scalps. So that's why our definition of good hair is different. And then, even more than that, in the book, we talk about how our hair is more than good. It is divine because it is God's design.
Got it. So, I think maybe let me ask the secondary question, because I think you kind of brought up something that I think some of the audience may or may not know. I think there's been this sort of transition about good hair versus bad hair. I think in this time, in the 21st century, I have heard it described more as curl pattern, right? So you have a loose curl pattern, or you have a tighter curl pattern. Have you heard that?
Yes, definitely the looser curl pattern is kind of on this, it's like a measuring stick, like we talk about in the book, with the conventional hair chart that is readily seen online, where it classifies hair types. And so in that conventional chart, you have the looser hair texture coming all the way to like straight hair being classified as on that good hair scale. And then hair, as it's more tighter and more kinky, it's going towards the bad hair in that classification. Right. So it definitely falls that.
Yeah. I wonder, just talking to you about this, I wonder, is there a similar analogy to what we might have called the paper sack test? Some of us on this call might remember that. Some of us may not, but there was a time where African Americans would have their skin color compared to a paper sack and whether or not they passed. I wonder if you, any thoughts about whether or not you think this is similar to that? Is this a modern day paper bag test, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, paper bag test, that's colorism. And so what we're talking about with our hair texture is really texturism, right? It's like one texture being superior to the other. And I think there was a practice, I can't remember which country it was in, but I think it was a pencil test. Yes. It was South Africa. And so it was similar to the paper bag test, where if someone could stick a pencil in, her hair and it didn't fall out, then that meant that your hair was more Afro-textured. It said a lot about, who was in your lineage, versus if you stuck the pencil in your hair and it would just slip through, right? And that would prove that your hair was straight. So, we have these different ways to rank our hair texture. And it really just goes back to this standard that was fabricated, that we didn't create for ourselves. It was really just forced onto us about, straight hair, European hair, that texture being what was standard, what was good, right? What made you the human, the standard human. So, and I think we sort of kind of replicated that ourselves. And like you said, it's evolved over the years, but it's still, texturism, right?
Mm-hmm. And so in your book, you talk a little bit about a hair wheel. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so kind of like I was talking about earlier with the conventional hair chart, in our book, we talk about that chart and kind of how it denotes hair by letters. So similar to like A, B, C. So it's kind of like grades of hair or levels in the hair texture. And so I found that akin, we all agreed that that's like akin to like letter grades that you would receive in school, kind of like A being the best and then B is
got it.
being, on the lower end. And so the conventional,
I would be like a 4C on that scale with my hair texture.
And then mom would be like a 4B.
Right.
I would be like a 4B. And so it does set up this kind of idea, and to Melissa's point from earlier, like a measuring stick of sorts, where it's like if you're on the upper end of the scale, if you're in the 1 or you're in the straighter part of that conventional chart, then your hair is looked at as it's good hair. So in our book, we have what we call a hair cycle checkup chart, and it's in a circle. And it is more about the health of hair than it is about just looking at the texture of the curl. Right. And so it focuses on hair porosity and density, which we discuss in our book and our glossary to define those terms. But essentially, is looking at hair from kind of how you would order your Thai food. So is it hot, medium, or mild? And so it just changes the language around how we talk about our hair. And as we change the language around that and we have different labels, then it changes our perspective on our hair.
That's exactly what I was trying to get to, wondering if you thought this idea of loose versus tight curl pattern was an evolution. Is it a better way of talking about hair, or is it still like a comparison to good versus bad? I think I hear you saying it's the latter rather than the first. Yeah. Let me switch gears a little bit here and ask you another question. How does the natural hair movement challenge conventional beauty standards? And why do you feel like it's so important for Black people to embrace their natural hair texture?
Okay. I mean, I could take the first part of that question. So I think it's sort of important to set the framework. So the natural hair movement that we refer to is really a resurgence of the natural hair movement that began in the 1960s with the Civil Rights Movement, and then it continued on into the 1970s with the Black Power movement, and then even into like the 1990s with kind of like the Black hair representation we saw on TV in the form of Black sitcoms, popular sitcoms. So the natural hair movement that we talk about now, when we refer to the movement, started in the 2000s. Part of that was just natural hair blogs coming online and highlighting popular hairstyles like cornrows or sister locks. And so that's the natural hair movement that when we talk about, this kind of movement to embrace our hair, we're really referring to that one.
Yeah, and it's important to embrace our natural hair texture because of the health benefits of it. So recently there has been research about eating synthetic hair, braiding hair that we add to our hair as extensions, how that can contain harmful chemicals that can be carcinogenic. And so there's a lot of health benefits behind just natural hair in general, just protecting our bodies and our health overall.
Right.
I'm going to insert myself in this conversation for a little bit. I've had locks for 34 years. I have about 4.5 feet worth of hair. However, to Sylvia's point, trying to do something a little different, you'll see I have 1 or 2 of these where they wrap the color in efforts to protect the hair, but I don't like it. I did it a couple of months ago, and my hair stylists, like, oh, this is a way to get fun color without, damaging your hair. And I've had locks for so long that I see the difference. And this is the first time that I've actually honestly thought that it might even be carcinogenic, or it might not, obviously it's not great hair. It's not the hair that I grew. But so thank you for pointing that out. I'll have to take a razor to it to get to cut it off the lock. Do you think the desire for our hair to conform to a certain beauty standard is present? I think I know what you're going to say, but I'd be interested in your answer. Let's start with Melissa. What do you think about that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're still pressured to conform to these Eurocentric beauty standards. In our book, there's a part where we talk about the burden of hair trauma. And, part of that is we as Black women feeling pressured to conform to, Eurocentric beauty standards, specifically with straightening our hair or having straight hair, and feeling that that's, beautiful or professional. We also talk about the blessing of inheritance, right? So I think it's important to remember that as kind of long lasting as these effects of Eurocentric beauty standards and this idea of good hair versus bad hair, as long lasting as those effects are, if you just stretch out each one of our coils, it will go further back than that abusive history, back to a history, in Africa. So, we talk about how in like medieval West African kingdoms, the hairstyles that Black women and Black men wore were like our ID cards, right? You can look at a person's hairstyle and learn about who they were, what clan they were from, what god or goddess they worshiped. The higher your hair was, the holier it was, because it was sort of like a spiritual antennae reaching to the heavens or pointing in that direction. So, our hair in its natural texture had value. So even as we are in the reality of feeling this pressure to conform, it's important to remember that it wasn't always that way. So I don't know if you... Right.
And I like what Melissa is saying, because it really starts with our perspective. Our hair is also a spiritual part of us, and it didn't really start with this society, how our hair is being seen. It started with creation, the way God intended to make our hair. And so I think for me, when I keep that focus in mind, that my hair, the way it naturally grows from my scalp, is good. It helps me not to get swallowed into this conventional pressure of trying to make my hair look a certain way.
I think about men versus women, and I don't know, I'm going to make a slight joke here, but I think men have this new cop out, because all the Black men can go bald, like scalp bald, with their big gorgeous beards and look beautiful, and that's accepted. But the moment you see a Black woman with completely natural hair, or even bald hair, short hair on her head, I often see people do a second take, right? And so, it kind of, in some ways for me, it kind of makes me think about bodies and what, what would be traditionally seen as beautiful or attractive, opposed to what wouldn't. I mean, there's like so many pressures on women generally, but Black women specifically. Do you have any response to that?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, there's a verse, I think we have it in our book, about how a woman's hair is her crown. And I think for all women generally, and Black women specifically, our hair is important to us and to our image. And of course, for both Black men and Black women, our natural hair is an extension of our identities. And for Black women, though, there is this pressure for our hair to conform and to look a certain way, the way it grows out of our scalps. And so if it's natural, or if you decide to go bald and have like a beautiful bald hairstyle, that's going to attract, looks or, judgments, or people can have even preconceived notions about what it would look like. And that's just part of the pressure or the attention we get as women, specifically as Black women, right? And so, and it's just important to realize that we all have crowns, whether you have your hairstyle or you just, you don't have as much hair, or you decide to go bald. And so your natural hair, or how you wear your hairstyle, is your crown, because it's really based on who you are, who your spiritual identity is. And you know, Mom talks about how we're defined by that identity, not by, you know, a physical feature of ourselves. But it is very important to us, and I think, you know, God cares about the things that we care about. So it's important to keep in mind how, as much as Black women, as much as we care about our hair, it's you know, God cares even more about how we wear our hair, how we feel about our hair, how we treat our hair. It's something that we're not alone in caring about. So.
And if I hear you, I mean, just to bring that, to extend that out, I mean, it's hair, but it's also your body. It's how you feed your body. It's how you take care of your body, how you love on yourself, right? As the highest honor, the temple, if I'm hearing you correctly, that we reside in, our spirit resides in. I'm sure all three of you women are very familiar with the Crown Act. We have our very own Holly J. Mitchell, who is one of our County Board of Supervisors, who was the author of the Crown Act. She and I were going to do a program. She's also natural hair. She has locks, long, beautiful locks as well. What did it mean to you when you heard that this law had passed in California? Or I assume you know? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I know that we think it's necessary because, you know, our hair still today is, you know, a victim of oppression or a victim of discrimination, right? And one of the things we look at, like the Crown research studies that have been put out, and Crown stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair, for people who are want to know. But, you know, even the research they put out that really validates the experience and verifies the experiences that a lot of Black women and girls have. So in their 2021 study, they talk about how Black girls as young as 5 can experience hair discrimination, and how as Black women, if we choose to wear natural hairstyles to work, we can be twice as likely, or I think 2.5 times more likely, to experience microaggressions or hair discrimination. So
that's right.
And we know that it's just this kind of, we need this political activity to protect our hair and to advocate for wearing our natural hair texture, because it's not just an issue of, you know, our pride, our self-pride, and how we feel about ourselves. It's also a physical health issue, as you were saying, only because our hair is an extension of ourselves, but also because we're learning and getting more research today about how a lot of products that are targeted at Black women and girls are actually detrimental, or can be detrimental, to our health. So, you know, it's necessary. We hope that it passes at the federal level, right? And
well, it did fail at the federal level, but I hope that it comes back around. It you know, remains to be seen in this current political environment, but I hope there is a day that it does find its way back to the federal government. You brought up something I think is really worth teasing out here. As I've mentioned, I've had locks for 34 years. It's hard to believe when I'm only 35, but really I've had them for a long time. Actually, I'm very much older than 35.
And
but I remember
your locks. I love your locks, Skye.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
Beautiful.
I appreciate you saying that. I love all of what I see here. But there was a time, Melissa, like, just to kind of bring back what you're saying, in the early days, I had locks before there were locticians. I locked my own hair without knowing what I do. You know, so if you see my scalp, it's not parted perfectly like you see, and there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, I see a loctician now, but I started at a different time where I was, I think, in a lot of ways trying to live what I hear you talking about in your book, of like trying to find myself and find my own peace in my naturalness, right? And just the way that I was made, it is what it is, right? So at a time where there were very few people having that conversation, because you've talked about it, there was this ebb and flow of the natural movement. And when I locked, it was a time where it ebbed rather than it flowed. And I would be discriminated against in job interviews. And, you know, I had, short, like little, hair sticking up, very well maintained, all of the things. But I remember someone saying to me, we can't have you having hair like that. My grandmother, let's talk about generation. My grandmother, who has now passed on, she would say to me, in terms of hair and texture, why would you waste all that good hair doing your hair like that? She would say that over and over, and that stuck with me for years. I had to really kind of balance my desire to see what my own hair looked like in its natural state with societal pressures. So let's talk a little bit about that with these young girls. When you think of young girls, and I know boys lock and have natural hair too, but it's more expected that women do something different or manage their hair in some way. Let's talk about what you think about this way, a path to self-love. What would you say? Obviously, your mother is like beyond, so maybe not the two of you, but what would you say to a young girl who's like, I don't like my hair. I don't like how it looks. I don't like the curl pattern or whatever. What would you say to her?
Mhm. You know, I really like the way our conversation is going because we actually had an opportunity to talk to some high schoolers. We went to Tease Me Cafe here in Indianapolis, and that's owned by Tamika Catchings. And so a lot of teenage girls came, and I had a chance to talk with them. And one of the things I said to them, this whole thing of not liking your hair, where is that coming from? Because I have what I talk about stages to get to hair love. And so you do start with this, and I explained to them the stage, which is called hair dislike. And that really comes from comparing your hair to a standard that you see is beautiful in society. So you think, well, my hair doesn't look like that, so I don't like my hair. And then you have this discontentment. And because of that discontentment, you want to keep trying to make your hair a certain way. And I call this next stage hair appeasement. And I was explaining to these, teen girls how you go from hair dislike to hair appeasement. So you're trying all different ways. And some of these things are damaging your hair because you're trying to appease everyone else and trying to get your hair celebrated by everyone else instead of you celebrating your own hair. And so I told them the stage you next go to will be hair discovery. Do some history researching, go to the library, learn about the history of your hair, learn about your own hair texture, how to
Thanks for the plug, Mom. We appreciate that.
Learn about the products that will take care of your hair. And so once you go through hair discovery, it really brings you to the stage, which I call hair appreciation. And you think, well, how did I get here? Well, you got there by studying and learning and finding out about your hair. And then you discover, wow, I can appreciate my hair. I don't need to make my hair look a certain way to please someone else. I appreciate the way my hair naturally grows from my scalp. And to get to the stage of hair love, it takes a while. I had one of my friends that told me it took her really up from the time her childhood up until her adult years before she got to hair love. But we can help teen girls get to that stage by first creating this sense of belonging within the educational institutions. We need all students to feel like they belong. And then we need to cultivate that self-worth. And I think that comes from not only having a curriculum of self-curriculum, social, emotional learning, and mental health. Right. There needs to be a curriculum, hair esteem. Let's create a hair esteem curriculum. And then once our team learn more about their hair and discover how creative it is, you can wear all kinds of styles. And it's just, it's so versatile and it's just unique. And I think that helps them get to the stage of hair love.
I totally agree. So let me just, for everyone who didn't hear, she said the steps are hair appeasement, to hair discovery, to hair appreciation, and then eventually getting to a place where we have a hair esteem curriculum. I love it. I love it. And I think, you're really touching on something, because I think a lot of girls, again, not just young Black girls, but young brown girls, young girls who are not young people of color, we have so much pressure to fit in and look a certain way and have a certain body, but just like taking that pressure off of them and say, you know what, whatever you have going right now, is perfectly you. I think that there's a lot of value to getting young girls thinking about how they are perfectly imperfect, perfectly, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was thinking about this idea of hair discovery when you were speaking, Sheila, and I was thinking back, like, when did I learn about locks? Because I grew up in the Midwest. There was nobody who had locks around me. It was in college when your mind opened up, when you got to see other people, other cultures. I was introduced to Rastafarianism, and for me, Bob Marley, which led me to the Kibra Nagas, which led me down, you know, Marcus Garvey, like reading and like absorbing culture, whether or not it was mine, it gave me a level of respect for the path that I was put on, you know, to go natural. So I love this idea of hair discovery. I'm gonna hold that. I'm gonna keep that one for myself, Sheila. Let's talk about some myths. What are a couple of hair myths that you three wonderful women would like to dispel?
Well,
Let me get one from each one of you.
Yeah, there's several hair myths. I think one of them is that natural hair is not attractive. And then we mentioned this in our book in the chapter about hair myths, and just embracing the concept and just the idea of knowing that your hair is beautiful and that no one should define you based solely on your hair. And it should be about who you are as a person too. Mm-hmm. But just dispelling that myth and just realizing that natural hair is beautiful just in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think another myth is just really thinking, we have a quote in our book about Black men not liking natural hair. And I think that's a myth in some respect, because a lot of Black men love our natural hair. I know my husband is one of them, because all the ways I tried to do my hair, he would always say, what have you done to your hair now? Just leave it natural. So he loves my hair just like this. And
I
so
love that.
That is a myth to think that Black men do not like natural hair.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one myth that bothers me is this idea that Black hair is tough, right? Or that it's really strong, or that it could take anything. When in reality, our natural hair is the most fragile of hair textures. It's actually hair with a straighter texture that is the strongest. I know, so you could talk about like the breakage points and things like that.
So with our curly hair, just the curves, each curve of our curly hair could be a point of breakage. So at your point, our hair is very fragile.
Right.
And I think you want to expand more on that.
Yeah, no, and it's just, and people think that it's not, and that you could just kind of take anything. And I've heard people tell Black women that, like, oh, your hair can take anything, and it's actually
kind of like the myth of the Black woman, the ultra strong Black woman who can withstand anything and has very little sensitivity or softness or breaking points, per Sylvia. Let me ask a couple of other questions here. And I was actually alluding to that too, Sheila, earlier when I was talking about Black men who can get away with the bald head and look fabulous with the beard and the whole thing. It's just a different environment. It's just a different place for Black women and Black female hair. What are some of the historical events, such as obviously slavery or segregation, and how do they play into societal views of Black hair? You already touched on this professionalism, but let's tease that out a little bit.
Right. So, I mean, I mentioned like the dehumanization of Black hair during slavery. And so if you kind of progress on after, slavery, centuries of slavery, 400 years without a comb, right? And also the Civil War in the 20th century, what you see is we as Black people wanting to adopt Eurocentric standards as a way to sort of assimilate into a white dominant society. And this assimilation is a way to improve your livelihood, right? So you can kind of enter, be accepted, be seen as professional. Straight hair was seen as, like I said, professional or urban, or, something that signaled that you were part of a middle class, right? And, one, you could say positive thing about this is that with the growth of the Black middle class, you get the growth of the Black beauty market, right? And so with that, you see the rise of the country's first self-made female millionaires. So you have Annie Malone and Madam C.J. Walker,
Yes,
who were
ma'am.
both daughters of formerly enslaved parents.
That's right.
Who, made themselves into millionaires. But you do see this idea of Black respectability as being a tool to assimilate and to improve your social standing, to improve your economic gain. And it was a part of changing your hair to try to change your status, right? And that's even why today, when you choose to wear your hair natural, that can be a way to resist these Eurocentric beauty standards. So just like how we would change our hair to assimilate, the way we wear our hair can also be a form of resistance to that those pressures to assimilate.
And, I'm really happy to say over the years, over 3 decades of me having natural hair, it's arguably even longer than that. I've actually never really gone the other way, but I'm always thrilled when I see more and more young women just taking the chance to see what their hair looks like, in braids or cornrows or locks or it just makes me so happy when I see them experimenting. And some of these styles are amazing, right? Natural styles are amazing. The artistry that, some of these young women are subjecting us to is really just really fantastic. Can you talk a little bit about the media and society in general and tend to place precedent on a woman's hair over her accomplishments? Again, I do think Melissa just alluded to this, but we think about these women who are in the news now, Gabby Douglas, Simone Biles, Michelle Obama. I cannot tell you how many comments and commentary I heard when one of the world's greatest athletes took her place on the throne, and all the commentary around her hair and the things that were happening. Let's talk about that. Serena Williams is another one. Like, all I hear about is her hair or her weave or whatever she's doing. Not that she's like the world's greatest athlete, which she is.
Right. Yeah. So in our book, I'm going to read a quote that kind of goes along with this, but it says, again, we have this misconception of what good hair is. Whether it is what we have seen on television or what we have heard others say, or even our own vain imagination, good hair is simply healthy hair. And this is by Zenobia Jackson. In our book, we talk about how we have a chapter called Hair Hate, and it does talk about Gabby Douglas. And one of the things that Gabrielle Douglas says is, what's wrong with my hair? I just made history and people are focused on my hair. You might as well stop talking about it. And so it's that our hair it does not define us. Our faith defines us, and the essence of our character does. And so we need to uplift one another. And I just think about The Little Mermaid and how in the trailers for it, when it was released on social media, how so many little girls were shown in these reactions to the actress.
I saw that, yes.
Black Disney princess and in a live action film, and then she was wearing locks. And so I think it's all about focus, and it's all about how Black women, we do want to lift one another up. And so we need to stop perpetuating the hair hate upon ourselves.
What are your thoughts around getting around the lifting up? Because I think many of us are still even unaware of our crabs in the barrel mentality. So how do you see us kind of checking each other and therefore checking for each other?
I really think, I think it starts in how we first respond when we see another Black woman wearing her natural hair. We have to self-check what thoughts come in our mind. And if we know those thoughts are being aligned with this societal pressure, thinking, why is she wearing her hair like this? I think those are the next negative thoughts we need to resist and begin to think, no, this is really courageous. This is beautiful. And then compliment. I think as Black women, we need to uplift one another, because we have to realize no one else is going to do it. We first need to do it. And I have done that a lot. And I've gone to just grocery stores or salons places, and have even seen older Black women with the beautiful graying hair, but it looks totally white. And I would say, "Oh, I just love your crown, just, gorgeous, And I say things like that, and it just, you can see how their face just changed. You're just like, oh, wow, And I think that is what we need to start. We need to first dispel those negative thoughts that come in our mind of, why is she wearing her hair this way? And begin to think, no, she's being courageous. And so this is really a chance for me to uplift her. And so I think if we keep doing it, we'll find that it will happen with us as well.
I was looking at my phone here because I saw a quote today, and that you're kind of alluding to for a different reason, but it says, practice the pause. When in doubt, practice the pause. So like taking that, when you think, what is she doing with her hair? Why is her hair like that? Take that pause and listen to yourself speak poorly about someone else. And then maybe giving yourself the opportunity to step back and say, like, why am I saying that? Or why would I go there rather than just say, is she living in her truth? Right.
Right.
Which is different than my truth. Right. So when you're creating the different recipes and resources available in your book, because we like food over here, where did you find the support and the information to build out this knowledge? And well, I'll start there and then I'll ask you a secondary question.
Yeah, so I did research in online public medical journals, and then also in articles that were reviewed by other medical professionals. But I also did my main research at the library. And so I remember checking out a book by Rosemary Gladstar, and it was about medicinal herbs. And it's like a guidebook. And so I used that book to learn how do we take certain herbs from the earth and use them for our hair care. And so that is where that was like my genesis of my research. And so I definitely say that the library played a big part into that. And then even when I was researching for other organic products, like for Beautifique, which is the organic lipstick line, I was using the library to look at how do you create different products or how you combine different ingredients. So formulation books are right there. You just have to check them out.
I love it. So you had your own little apothecary happening at home. That you self-taught apothecary, and I might have just made that word up, but you know where I was going with it, right? Where in the country are you all located? Are you here in California, West Coast, East Coast, middle of the country?
Yeah, we're in Indianapolis.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even more interesting, because I was going to say, if you're on the coast, you're used to this like apothecary and natural, you have all the herbs, all the availability. But when you're in the Middle West, I grew up in the Middle West, it's much more complicated to get or access, I would assume, or at least it was when I lived there. So you really did have to go digging, quite literally. Hey?
That's true, yes.
But
yeah.
A lot of your recipes are like, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of Sylvia's like recipes are like, like the DIY. So she talks about how you can go into your kitchen and pull out a lot of these natural ingredients. And one of the things we talk about in the book was how, for me, when I was 29, I was diagnosed with a form of alopecia, so CCCA. Cicatricial alopecia, which is a form that's commonly experienced by Black women. And so I started to lose hair in my crown. And, I talk about it more in the book, but what eventually ended up happening is that Sylvia came up with different hair care recipes for me to heal my scalp. I was experiencing scalp inflammation. So she would put things together and tell me how like you can apply this to your scalp, and it healed my scalp. And then of course Mom, she helped to send me, like, she would send me prayers to pray about my hair, my hair esteem, and send me affirmations. And so just both of that kind of that practical aspect and the spiritual aspect together was both of them coming alongside me. And then that journey really became the book. So that's why there's, the spiritual reflections and also the hair care recipes that you could do yourself to heal your scalp, to take care of your hair, to set up a hair regimen. So it came out of that experience of them walking alongside me with my natural hair journey.
I love that. Ladies, what are you reading?
Mhm. Well, I love children's books.
Me too.
Picture books. And so I just finished reading this book called If My Hair Had a Voice. And it's written by Dana Marie Mirabali. And it's illustrated by Patricia Granum. And it's about a school-age girl who does research about her hair, and she learns about the diversity of her hair and history and her hair identity. And so I also have to say this, that the illustrator, Patricia Granum, is also going to be the illustrator of my upcoming children's book, which will be put out by Beaming Books in 2026. And it's going to be a children's book about a little boy who loves the way his hair bounces back.
I love it. We'll keep an eye out for that. What about you two, ladies? What are you reading?
So I'm reading The Longest Night in Egypt, and it's a middle grade fantasy book. So I love middle grade books, and so that's what I'm reading right now.
Yeah. So I like fantasy too. So I'm like rereading this title, Amaro 2. So The Quest for Kush, and it's by Charles R. Saunders. It's like a medieval historical fantasy book with a main female character who has natural hair, and she's gorgeous. Anyway,
I love it. I'm really nerdy, and I like to read nonfiction. So I am like fish out of water when it comes to fiction. Although I did read recently and interview Jasmine Ward in her book Let Us Descend, and so when Sylvia was talking about her apothecarian expertise, I was thinking of the character from Jasmine's most recent book, and there's a whole episode of her learning about different mushrooms and the properties of mushrooms, the healing and the murderous, quite frankly, because as we know, some mushrooms can kill you. And like this woman being led by a guide, by a spiritual guide, in fact, teaching her about how to identify these. And then so the lore of going down, I highly recommend it. I don't read very much fiction, but when you get to it, it's well worth your time. I have only a few minutes, ladies, and I want to ask you a couple of questions from the chat. We have, there's a comment here, says, greetings from Port Stanley, Falkland Islands. Anybody know where that's at? I do not.
Okay.
But someone is on the call saying hello to you and listening to this call. Here is a question. I've always loved my natural hair, and who cares what other people think? If they have style preferences, I wore my hair natural since I was 15 years old, and I'm 49 years old now. Live and let live. Beauty comes in all hair textures. Thank you so much for the presentation. This is coming from Carla. Here's a question from Morgan. How do you think the discovery, this is a good one. How do you think the discovery of harmful chemical in relaxers affected Madam C.J. Walker's legacy? I was going to bring this up, but I didn't want to take over.
No, that's an excellent question. I think one thing to keep in mind about Madam Walker is that when she came out with her products, there were other competing products, kind of white-owned companies that were, creating these hair straighteners, chemical straighteners, and the way they would market their supplies to Black women was to make us feel bad about who we were and how we looked and to say, and they kind of used very derogatory language in their advertisements. And what made Madam Walker different, what made her really the genius businesswoman that she was, is that she really focused on building up ourselves as Black women. So she would say, feel good about yourself, instill confidence in yourself, and then, use my product to help yourself reflect what you feel about your image or yourself inside, right? And she would build up Black women and help us to become sort of like economically independent by going out to sell your products. So her focus wasn't so much on, feeling like you need to relax your hair because there's something wrong with your hair. She really shifted her focus to feeling good about yourself and
self-esteem and entrepreneurism. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the time period that we were in to use those types of products to straighten our hair. And of course, the time has evolved since now, right? So but I think it's important to just remember Madam Walker, the daughter of formerly enslaved parents. She was a washerwoman washing white women's clothes, and then she builds up everything to become a self-made, like I said, millionaire. And it was really by, kind of going to Black women, telling them, you could be confident, you can make your own way, you can feel good about yourself, and my product is a way to help you do that.
Yes,
for the time
I like
she
that.
was in. So, right, I think that's really good to see. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. This is an important question. I want to make sure I get to it because I would love to hear your answer. And I have my own answer. A question here is it okay to ask or compliment Black people on their hair? It seems like it's a cultural taboo, whereas white people, as for white people, it's a cultural practice to talk about hair. I think that's a great question. I would love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yes, I think that it is good to compliment African American women, girls about their hair. I think that it's just about treating people in the same way that you would treat yourself. So I think that if that is a comment that you want to say, you're just going to say something like, well, your hair looks beautiful, or I really like that style. And so I think that just coming from a place of putting the person first and kind of thinking about them and something that, like we were talking about earlier, that would uplift them. I think that it is good to like use your voice in that way to affirm somebody else. And so I think uplifting them in that way is fine. I think that if you're changing the comment to where it's something like, well, why did you decide to wear your hair that way?
Right.
That's when it kind of goes into that gray area of maybe coming off as
Judgment.
And judgmental. So I would just, phrase it in a way that is affirming, like I like, just like we would say for anything else, like, oh, I like what you're wearing, so I like your hair.
One caveat I might add to that, if I could here, is that it's one thing to compliment someone's hair. It is quite another to reach out and touch it. Exactly. So I would just always ask anyone, if you see anyone with something beautiful hair, or ask permissions.
That's right.
They may say yes, but just remember personal space. There are so many wonderful comments, and I feel I'm going over a little bit, but I want to make sure I say them. I have one here. Nice to see you, Shelia. Blessings to you and to your daughters. Have such a great conversation. Love, Tracy. The Shelia Club is here. There is another one. Great presentation, very informative. Thank you. Here's one that I wanted to make sure I said. I'm loving how Shelia raised her daughters to be strong in faith in the Most High. Let's say that so we can be inclusive here, and grow up to have confidence in how He made them. So listen to all these compliments, Mom.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good questions, very encouraging, very enlightening conversation. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. I realize you're in Indianapolis, so it's 10 o'clock, so it's probably time to let you go to sleep. We appreciate you. For those of you who are still on, let's make sure you check out these books, and we'll wait for that children's book. You folks have a wonderful night. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.